CDBG? Okay. And can you explain what that means in terms of what work we're not able to do under CDBG? Was it earmarked to do something else, or is it money that's just there that's available to kind of be shifted around?
Sure.
Chair Quincy, Councilmember Cano, is swapping CDBG eligible projects it's swapping CDBG eligible projects from the development account to CDBG, and then using the freed up development account monies for the infill project.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm interested in this precisely because of the same reasons that Council Vice President Elizabeth Glidden expressed. And we did, I did get a chance to review the staff report that was slated for discussion at the CDRS committee at our most recent cycle. And last night we had a forum on gentrification. It's actually the second forum that I host on the topic. And so this issue of long-term affordable housing in our city is really important. And it's extremely vital to ensure that our city retains and protects not only our diversity, but our economic, not only our cultural diversity, but also our economic diversity. And so I'm really interested in figuring out how to continue to work with you and Councilmember Goodman and Vice Chair Frey of the CDRS committee and figuring out how we can increase that long-term affordable threshold in our infill housing policy to ensure that we are being really specific about targeting dollars to the land trust and to other organizations that are invested in legally protecting affordability for the long haul in our city. So I will be voting to support this today and just wanted to express my deep interest in figuring out how to really position this project to elevate more of these long-term affordable housing opportunities for the residents of our city. And I think there was a threshold of like 25% mentioned in the CDRS report, meaning that, was it no less? Something about how it was like no less than 25% should be allocated to long-term affordable housing opportunities. And I think that, that the floor needs to be set higher. So I look forward to working with folks on figuring out how we can get to that bigger investment in long-term affordable housing opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Frey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Yang, I know, has done a lot of work on this topic the last 3 years, and a lot of it goes unnoticed. If you looked at the ward just a few years ago, there was a substantial number of vacant properties, and there still are. But he has found ways through the combination of Green Zones North as well as iterative efforts to infill a lot of these properties. And while Green Zones North is, in some senses, expiring, and that effort was focused on a combination of green and infill, I think this effort is a great one to get underway, which is concentrated on infill and affordable rather than green. And so, I think this is a really important effort, and the amount of money that we have in there right now, I personally don't think is enough, but this is definitely moving in the right direction.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too want to compliment my colleague who's taken this issue of the substantial inventory that we have, as well as the county's tax forfeited work. He's done great work on this, as well as oomphed up our attempt to reclaim and save existing properties too. So it's a huge job. I agree with Councilmember Frey. This is kind of a drop in the bucket. But in reality, there are only so many houses that can get built in a year in a construction season. And so I think staff wisely doesn't allocate or doesn't recommend allocating money ahead of the need being completely fulfilled. The question that I had, and it's for Ms. Green, so we are using $250,000 of CDBG program income. So does that then diminish this number that we established in the chair's motion of $596,000 of program income that's available?
Chair Quincy, Council President Johnson, that is correct. Okay. $250,000 of the 500 almost $600,000 in program income will be
Okay.
allocated to an existing program that's already using CDBG
Great.
in order to swap the development
Great.
funds.
Thank you
for
so
this
much.
one.
I think that does help clarify the sources. Thank you very much. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify that this is not a lot of money for this kind of program. And I mean, I could just give you the quick math on it. If it costs $250,000 to build a home, that home isn't going to sell at that price in much of North Minneapolis. So this program would be providing the gap funding in between what it costs to build the home and what someone would buy the home for. So each home will have a subsidy in the $25,000 to $75,000 range. That's our opportunity to turn around and say, you can be forgiven of $5,000 perhaps for each year you live there over X number of years. There needs to be a lot of different strategies. The land trust model is a good model, but they're not going to be able to do all the homes in 1 year. There's going to have to be multiple models that are used in order to bring this to scale. And I'll also note we are accepting $500,000 from MHFA to put into this pool of work for the first year, but $250,000 probably would help assist 5 homes. Just so you know. So we're not talking about huge numbers. And actually, with the subsidy we're looking at in North Minneapolis being a little bit larger, it could be 4 to 5 homes for each $250,000. So even with $1 million, we're only talking about 20 homes. I just want to make sure everyone realizes that.
Thank you. Councilmember Frey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly. So when there's a grant given by MHFA in the range of $500,000. We were matching it, getting us up to $1,250,000, and this remaining $250,000 gets us up to the 1.5. So just to clarify.
Thank you very much for that. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just, I'll be really brief, but I will say that the work that has been done with the Green Homes North has really stimulated adjacent development of homes that are perhaps more affordable than some of even the Green Homes North, as well as some of the private development that has happened. And it's building confidence in the neighborhood. It's building housing values, which then decreases the subsidy so that they do sell for more when they're constructed. So it's a really positive intervention in an area that really was decimated in the housing crisis.
I'd just like to add to that point that the Council President just made is, in addition, the Green Homes North project helps assure affordability for the longer term for these homeowners because the operating costs of those homes are reduced because of the green energy savings that has been initiated in that program. So that's another way to keep costs down is through those building standards. Not seeing anybody else on this item. Is that correct? All right. So all those in favor of this motion by Councilmember Yang, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And that passes. We have Council Vice President Glidden, who's next, and I think there's a amendment being passed out right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So while this is getting passed out, I will describe what the proposed amendment is and then would like to speak to it, please. This is an amendment to the mayor's recommended budget that would do 2 things. One is that it would decrease Minneapolis Police Department by $150,000 from additional sworn staff, and then increase Health Department by $150,000 to be allocated for programs related to domestic violence prevention, with the goal of serving families that have experienced domestic violence, prioritizing families with very young children, young adolescent males, and non-English speaking families. And then second, it amends the mayor's recommended budget by decreasing the Minneapolis Police Department by $250,000 from additional sworn staff and increasing Health Department by $250,000 to support youth violence prevention, group violence intervention, and violence prevention and early intervention services to youth who are at risk of victimization or perpetration of violence. And then if I could go ahead and have some discussion here. So I am putting forward this amendment. I will say I know that this is probably not likely to pass, but I do think that it is part of our job as the council to have legitimate, respectful debate about large investments that are made, especially ones that involve high numbers of staff. I wanted to say what this motion is not. It's not a motion that says that I do not support new officers. I have supported adding staff to the Minneapolis Police Department, I think almost every time they've been proposed throughout the years I've been on the council. And this proposal supports 3/4 of the original proposal, or in other words, adding 11 sworn staff to the Minneapolis Police Department, in addition to the other investments that are being made in making sure that we're supporting CSO classes and other ways that we are increasing our ability to make sure that we have a well-staffed police department. I think the question that I'm trying to raise, though, that again I think is part of our job as council members, is whether adding 15 police officers is the right number and how to balance that with other public safety supports. It's hard, I will say, once the mayor's budget is out, especially for public safety staff positions, it's almost like those numbers are sacrosanct. They very rarely get discussion and debate. And that's because these are very important functions for the city of Minneapolis. And sometimes I think it's hard for us to have, again, legitimate, respectful debate about how are we supporting those functions in a way, or how are we doing it in the right way. The other thing I will say is that for the police department, unlike maybe fire, where they have some mechanisms that they use to try to say we use so many staff for how many residents in the city or things like that. There's not a mechanism like that for police and how they serve. So we look at a number of measures, including what are our crime rates like, what are we hearing from residents, how are we balancing the different types of duties that we want to happen in the police department itself, and then how are we balancing that with other investments that are really there to support the public safety infrastructure. I'll maybe close with what are kind of the two things that I am saying with this motion. One is that, again, I do not oppose adding police officers, and this motion proposes adding 11 sworn staff to our police department. But I am concerned that we haven't balanced that addition with enough investment in public health and community-driven safety strategies. So this motion retains that, I think, value proposition that we are not proposing to divert money to indirect ways to support public safety, but these are direct ways to support public safety. They are just outside of the police department budget and within the health department budget. The second thing that I will say is that as someone who has been on this council through tough budget times, I do have an honest concern about adding a large number of staff, especially, I'll say, especially sworn staff, where we have a special investment in hiring those staff, long-term investment in hiring those staff, when, in my opinion, we are entering perhaps a bit of uncertain times relating to what might happen, not within the city of Minneapolis, but within other levels of government that may, in the end, affect our budget. And so adding 15 officers is a lot to support. That's in addition to 5 firefighters. if we do face a situation in the future, and again, I just say this not because I have a crystal ball and I think that's going to happen, but I do think we're spending way up to our levy. I'll just say that that is a very distressing situation for our staff in the city and for us to try to figure out how do we balance what we need to do in that circumstance. So that is my other concern with putting this number of officers into our budget and our ability to be able to support that as we would want and need to do over a long period of time. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councilmember Bender in queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had the chance to talk about this a bit with many colleagues, and echoing what Councilmember Glidden said in making the motion, I would hope that if we were having the addition of $2 million worth of additional FTE in any department in our city, we would expect to discuss that publicly so that we are able to make informed decisions as policymakers and keep our constituents informed about why we're making the decisions we are. In my mind, the question in front of us, again, is not whether or not to add resources to our police department. This budget has over $5 million proposed in additional resources to the police department. And I've had many conversations with the chief of police, the assistant chief of police, and other members of the police department about how that work fits into the overall work that they're leading in collaboration with our health department, our city attorney's office, and across the enterprise to both respond to crime, but also do these really important upstream preventative investments that reduce crime in the long term. And I think we have the full support of our leadership in our police department on those preventative strategies. So I think the question in front of us, again, in this proposal, there are still 11 additional sworn officers. The question is about that additional funding. What is the best, most effective way in the long term to use tax dollars to prevent and reduce crime? Is it always in only responding to crime through officers? Or is it also investing in, I'd ask my colleagues to listen to what I'm saying and have a chance to speak when I'm finished. So this proposal takes the perspective that in addition to adding officers, we need to add additional investment in prevention of crime. The two programs that we have highlighted here, I know in particular the first one has a lot of support in the council, maybe not for this particular funding source, but this would be programs that are focused on helping families that have been victims and had experience of domestic violence in their home in a holistic way that serves both the victims of violent crime, the children who may have been victimized or witnessed violent crime in the home, as well as the perpetrators. Understanding that through support, it often is a very effective way of reducing that crime. And there's a high correlation between folks who've been abused as children, who then are violent in the home and then become violent in the community. So this work fits in very well, with the work that our city attorney's office, health department, and police department are already collaborating on to address and prevent domestic violence in the home as a way to prevent violence in our community over time. The second item is expanding and supporting our youth violence prevention, our group violence intervention and violence prevention services to youth who are at risk of victimization and perpetration of violent crime. Other cities have shown significant reductions in violent crime when they invest in youth who are victims of violent crime themselves, who are at risk of perpetrating violent crime. And again, I think that this is a way of us saying we have hope for the future of our community in every neighborhood in our city, that we want to invest in our youth to give alternative options and support, that if someone has been victimized in the past and we know may become a perpetrator in the future, we are trying to create alternative pathways and support. So with that, I will end and thank Vice President for moving this forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Bender. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I respect the fact that there are many ways to go about trying to deal with the city's very complicated problems. I just absolutely think this is a ridiculous thing to do. 15 new police officers amongst 5 precincts means 3 people in each precinct that are new. And each precinct has 3 shifts. So actually what it means is 1 additional police officer per shift, per precinct, citywide. So I don't believe that's an excessive number of police to be hiring if they were all doing patrol work throughout the city. In my ward on Monday night, there was a gunfire shootout at 15th and Nicollet, where the windows of the Nicollet Diner were blown out for the 2nd time yet this month. We need beat officers on South Nicollet as a result of the gang warfare that has come to that area, and to tell my constituents that we are not going to be able to provide that because of the problems in the warehouse district, the encampment of homeless people at Hennepin and Nicollet that the police have to deal with on a daily basis, the increase in activity with regard to aggressive solicitation and panhandling downtown. And even the night we were here for the public hearing, there was a robbery in my ward of people who were home that was happening while we were getting ready to prepare for our budget discussion. Crime is a problem in the city. And the more we try to bury our heads and say it's just a North Minneapolis problem, or it's just a Lake Street problem, or it's just a prostitution problem, or it's just downtown, and it is not paying attention to what the public is saying, at least not to me. I'll also note there are 59 new positions and $16 million of new spending in this budget. Why we could not find funding for this domestic abuse program, which I strongly support, and if there is a need for more youth violence prevention activity, I could be open to that conversation. I have much stronger feelings about the domestic abuse project work because I believe about half of the crimes in the city are as a result of that. If the people who are proposing this think this is a huge issue and there's a lot of support on the council to fund these services, then I'd urge you, if this gets voted down, to come back with a source that people can support that is not in the police department. It's pretty simple, because I do think there's a lot of support for the domestic abuse project, but pitting it against 1 officer per shift, per precinct around the city doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Our number 1 job in the city of Minneapolis is to make sure it's safe. That is job 1. That's what we were elected to do. I've been here during times of high crime, and I've been here during times of a lull in crime, and I know how horribly crime affects everything else we're doing. Every other effort that we have going on in the city doesn't work if we don't have a safe city. And when I have people at 15th and Nicollet eating in a diner while the windows are shot out at 6:30 at night, asking for only a beat patrol from 6 to 10, I'm not telling them that we don't have enough police to do that.
Thank you. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions to review on this, and I had reached out to our finance staff just to try to get some clarity. So my first question is for the authors of this effort, and I'm not sure if you'll know the answer to this, but in the proposed $250,000, which is on your second paragraph here, to support youth violence prevention, group violence intervention, and violence prevention and early intervention services to youth who are at risk, is there a specific program that would go to, or I'm just trying to understand if any of those dollars would be earmarked for the Build Leaders program.
Is that for Council Vice President Glidden or for Finance?
Whoever might be able to answer that question.
That's more
Go ahead. Please, go ahead.
a question for the maker of the motion, I think. So these are referring to programs that have been identified in the budget. The idea is, should this would pass, and again, I'm hearing from my colleagues kind of their thoughts, and we'll take our vote on it, but is that we would work with the health department on how to properly allocate that, and could even bring staff direction on Wednesday to put more particularity to that. I think that depends on if this motion passes or not.
Councilmember Bender, if you could follow up, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, sort of gauging the level of support, the health department could provide more information. Some of the potential specific programs that this could support would be the Inspiring Youth Program. $655,000 would support one's staff worth of caseload capacity in that program, where we're getting referrals from within our schools. And we have had a waiting list for that, so there is additional need in that program. It could fund the hospital-based violence prevention program. We had a very powerful presentation of that program at the HESA committee, so that could help expand that program. We do some work with parent support. We have 3 parent support and education programs that are managed by the health department that this funding could be used to augment. And of course, if any council members who want to support this reallocation of funds have specific feedback about prioritization, I think all of us co-authors would be open to that.
Thank you. Councilmember Cano, you still have the floor if those answered your questions.
Yes.
They did.
So I'm sorry. I want to just say a couple more things here.
Sure.
I guess, that the issue for me is a difficult one because, I represent the 9th Ward, which is part of the 3rd Precinct, and the 3rd Precinct is the largest geographic precinct in the city, and it's also the one with the highest service calls in the city. And I've had the privilege and opportunity to work with some really good police officers over the last year in response to some of the shootings and stabbings that have happened on Lake Street and in other parts of the ward. And I've gotten to understand more about the hard work that goes on in their line of day-to-day service. So while I support the idea of figuring out ways that our police department can better serve our community, I don't think I can support this motion the way that it has been presented right now. I had the opportunity to talk to Councilmember Cam Gordon a few times in person and over text about my interest in supporting something like this if the dollars went specifically to youth employment opportunities. And that's because I have seen firsthand how young people at Little Earth, when they are employed directly and significantly, are then able to leave the cycle of violence and drugs and even prostitution. And so I was pretty clear and pretty direct in that I could only support something like this if the money was going directly to, for example, our Build Leaders program or a jobs, employment, and training program for young people in the racially concentrated areas of poverty in our city. And I don't quite see that here. So I think that I would be happy to work with the authors of this and my colleagues who I admire. I don't want, I hope folks don't take this, in a personal way. I really do want to work with, Councilmembers Gordon and Glidden to see if there's another way to achieve this and possibly bring something forward on the 7th. And so I'm not able to, at this point, support this in the way that it has been structured. But I would be happy to figure out if there's a way that we could change this and bring it back next week or even right now. I'm not going to be able to support the domestic violence prevention, the work. And I would even say if you wanted to divide your motion and make it, make the first half one motion and then make the second part of it with an amendment to directly send those dollars, those $250,000 into the Build Leaders program, I could certainly support that. And then, in general, this just makes me think about what is the real question we're trying to answer here. And I think there's a question about what is the role of our Minneapolis Police Department, and what is the right type of work that they should be doing, and what are the mechanisms that the city of Minneapolis has in place to make sure that they are achieving that goal. And so I wonder too how we could structure some kind of funding to continue to deepen our mechanisms of accountability and citizen oversight on policing and improving these relationships, right, between our community and our police department. So my mind really goes sort of at that root cause, because it is a little tough to have to decide between, supporting our police department, which, in my district is extremely strained and busy and gets a lot of calls, and something like domestic violence or youth violence. And so I feel like that dichotomy is hard, and I think that in a way it's sort of a false dichotomy, and I'm trying to figure out how we can get to a point where we can fund the accountability mechanisms that I think would help improve the work that our police officers are doing, and figure out ways that we can revamp our own systems internally to ensure that residents and citizens who serve on our boards and commissions have much more oversight and influence over issues of police brutality and discipline. And I've even had conversations with other union leaders who believe that there really is a way for us to ensure that we hold the quote unquote bad apples accountable, and that we just have to build that political will and build that relationship base to get there. And so I want to say that I'm committed to working with, the authors of this initiative to see if there's something else we can bring forward on the 7th. But because of the severe level of violence that my district faced this summer, when it came to commercial sexual exploitation and gun violence, drug dealing, needles everywhere, it's really tough to find a way here. So the very root cause that I would like to support, which is the youth employment strategy, is really where my interest lies and where I think we could have the most impact in addressing some of these patterns of violence in our city.
Okay. Thank you very much. There was a minor glitch in our queue system. The glitch was actually user error by Councilmember Palmisano. But she wants to speak next. Just kidding. We're okay. But Councilmember Palmisano, and then we'll go to Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've done a lot of work on the domestic abuse project portion of this motion, and you won't see my name on it. The domestic abuse project is a really important partner of the city's, one that we've worked with for several years. I do believe, unfortunately, that this motion directly removes new officers, because it does. The competing argument here is one I think we all agree on. These kinds of things address the fundamental root causes of some of the violence we experience in our city. So it may seem like, to some, it may seem like a very relevant way to give more to those root causes of violence, and that's something I support. One of the problems here is that domestic abuse becomes generational, and there are over 17,000 calls per year that our police are dispatched on that are related to domestic violence. We, meaning the city and our partnerships that we've had over the years with DAP, have done amazing work on this. I think we might be one of the leading cities in the country on this kind of effort. I support other kinds of funding removed first to fund this work. We are working on finding the appropriate place, and it doesn't mean we're done looking. In fact, there's a motion later on that perhaps suggests another source. Our city is growing, and confirmed last night through conversation with Assistant Chief Arneson, this removes an FTE from downtown. So this is 2 FTEs for each precinct, and then 4 for downtown. Is that wise, given what we've seen and what we've experienced? I know that we all, council, mayor, and police, are working hard to reform police efforts in our city. And I've spent several hours yet this week alone listening to the community directly on this topic. Recruitment is one of the ways we're transforming police. But the expectation of overtime staffing to help fill our staffing requirements that we want in each precinct isn't fair. It's not attractive to new hires. Millennials in particular, and we have an aging police force, are not attracted to jobs with this kind of expectation of overtime. We want, and what I hear that the community wants, is police not to be as rushed with their work, but we need to give them the environment to be successful. Unfortunately, the way this funding source works, to me, sends a strong signal that we have enough police. And I know up here we're divided on that. We've been told time and time again that we won't have community policing until we get our numbers up, and we've done a lot of that work over the last 3 years. I am frankly frustrated with some of the efforts that City Council and police have used or maybe not used together, and I urge police and us to work to better that relationship. Thus, I'm interested in moving an alternate funding source, but that doesn't take away from police FTEs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Council President Johnson. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I would urge my colleagues not to support this motion. I'd just like to point out a few things. Actually, we don't even get one police officer per precinct with this because people have vacations. They have days off. And only our officers in the patrol are scheduled 4 days a week. That's 3 days that you don't have a police officer. So it isn't even a person per precinct. We have 100 less police officers than we did in 2009 in this city. 100 less police officers, authorized strength, than we did in 2009. We have not had big increases in the police department. We have had decreases, and it's decreases because of budget challenges. We have attrited our police department while we have increased the population. It seems to me that someone said it's important. It's an important function for our city. It's not important. It's the number one function of government, is protecting the safety of its citizens. And I'm sure people get these shot spotter maps every week. Now, I suppose some people pay attention to them and some people don't. And you know, if you live on the north side, this one has 72 reports of shots fired, shots, spotter activation, shootings, 72 across the city for 1 week. 27 of them occurred in the rest of the city. The rest occurred on the north side. In this week of March 10th, 62, 11 happened in the rest of the city. So it seems to me it's very easy to talk about the challenges, and I give the mayor credit. She's got a balanced look at how you invest in programming in addition to additional officers. But it is crystal clear to me that we need more police officers. I would invite my colleagues, when they look at these, also to look at response times. Response times are down across the whole city. People are waiting a minute longer when a priority one call comes in every precinct in this city. Priority one is somebody is being shot. There's a gun scene, that kind of thing. Those are the calls that people are waiting a minute more for. Well, when you're waiting for, or a home invasion, a minute more, think about how long a minute is. We need to not just put these 15 officers in place this year. We need to develop a plan that increases the size of our police department to accommodate just the growth in population that we have. It is ridiculous to talk about cutting police officers in this budget. And it's easy for people who don't deal with people calling them and saying they're afraid to let their children walk around the block because people are shooting at each other car to car on our arterial streets through neighborhoods. It's obscene what is going on in some of these neighborhoods across our city. People's lives are in danger. We have had a grandmother killed. We've had a 12-year-old girl killed. We've had a auntie dropping her niece off at a house. Killed innocent victims in this city. We have to get a control on what is going on. We need to make sure that we have enough police resources to go after these guns, get them off the street. That is aggressive law enforcement, and there are places in this city that we need it. And we are investing, as the mayor put in, $250,000, if I remember in my mind, for group violence intervention. We now have the pro forma of how those dollars are going to be spent. We also have youth violence prevention. Those dollars have been allocated. We have a program in North Minneapolis. We've been doing working with the Domestic Abuse Project with a federal grant for, I think, 2 years to address these domestic abuse calls, which are nearly 40% of the calls that our police department gets. I'm happy to look at additional resources, maybe for other areas of the city. It's a federal grant that we have on the north side for this domestic violence prevention. But don't take it from police officers when our citizens are crying, calling me on the phone, crying. They're fearful for their children. Our police officers, just the other day, people are fighting. I heard this from not the inspector, lieutenant at the 4th Precinct. People, they get a report of people firing guns, driving down the street, firing guns, car to car, shooting at each other. The question is, what time is it? Is it 9 o'clock in the morning when the kids are waiting for the bus? Maybe we don't chase them then, if it's 9 o'clock in the morning when the kids are waiting for the bus, because we don't want to put kids in danger of being hit in a chase. Those are the kind of decisions that our police officers are making today. It is a challenging environment. The other night I heard somebody complaining because they had a police camera on their corner. They had the police camera on their corner because there were shootings there. People were shooting at each other. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable what is going on in this community. And the thought that you're going to cut what the mayor has recommended for the police department is absurd.
Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me begin by just saying that I truly appreciated the comments made by Council Vice President Glidden that we should have respectful civil debate on any number of topics up here, and so I appreciated that. With regards to this specific issue, though, I do have to say that with the growing city that we have, we're at about 415,000 people, maybe a little bit more than that now. And the numbers that we have at this point, authorized strength is 862. And with this increase, we would probably be at about 877. I think that's very reasonable. In fact, I think we do need to have a conversation at some point in the future about where our police department should be in terms of staffing. And I think the numbers suggest that we should have more policing. And, when you think about that, with regards to looking at the number of police that are authorized and the crimes that are committed, what we have seen with the statistics is that, typically speaking, when we have more officers, the crime does go down. And I just wanted to point out also that, when we look at these numbers, 206 shootings in the 4th Precinct alone this year, and that's 50 more than last year. And 2/3 of all gunshot victims are in the 4th Precinct. And, I think to echo Council President Johnson's points, at least for me, my constituents would like to see more cops. And, it's not because, they're pro-cop or anti-cop. It's just because their daily lives, they see this stuff happening. And they just want good response. They want good customer service from our police department, but they do want more cops. And so I don't think I can support this. Thank you.
Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When it comes to the domestic violence prevention money, it's something I think is really important. It's a very good program, and so I'm glad to see colleagues looking around trying to find funding for that. I know I have offered up several different sources than this to colleagues, which I think would be less controversial than this particular source and more supportable and actually something that can pass. And that's what I would hope we're looking for if we're trying to get the funding ultimately for this. I know we had a lot of folks come in the other night talking at our public hearing about the police department and asking us not to hire more officers. And I understand a lot of the different concerns that they raised and empathize with those concerns. And I think that this council and the mayor and the police department has put in a lot of work to better train our officers, increase accountability of our officers, and ask them to do more, to do the work that we want, the work to change so that there are friendlier officers, that they're spending more time doing conflict resolution, that they understand implicit bias